Good morning, anatomy students. Today is going to be lesson 2 in the special senses, and we're going to start tackling the visual sense. And we are very visual, so there's a lot of information. I'll probably have to break this up into 2 lessons. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, our visual perception, our visual pathway, dependent on the eye and its accessory structures. So our visible wavelength of light is what we typically refer to as the colors of the rainbow that we all know with that wonderful acronym Roy G. Biv, going from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. All right, vision is possible because of photoreceptors that are able to catch photons of electromagnetic radiation in the 400 to 700 nanometer wavelengths. Anything outside of 400 to 700 nanometers in wavelength is not visible to our eyes. Okay, so if it goes smaller than 400 nanometers, that gets us into the ultraviolet spectrum. If the wavelengths go larger than 700 nanometers, then that gets us into infrared. Okay, so this all is in the electromagnetic spectrum. The only wavelengths we can see are these 300 nanometers worth right there. Okay. Our eyeball is about 2.5 centimeters in diameter, roughly an inch, with only about 16% of it is viewable when you look someone in the eye. So this amount of your eyeball right here, that's only 16% of your eyeball. The rest is all inside your skull, in your orbit. The accessory structures of the eye are the extraocular muscles. Each eyeball has 6 of these. Okay, we have 6 of these muscles, and they're the muscles that move our eyeballs around. They allow our eyeballs to pivot and rotate and shift inside the orbit. The palpebra, which are your eyelids, the conjunctiva, which is the protective lining on the inside of the eyelid, and the lacrimal glands. And these are your glands that produce and drain tears. So the glands produce the tears and the ducts drain the tears. The pupil is an opening for light to pass into the back of the eye. So here's your pupil, and technically it's a hole. It's an open space for light. Okay, the only thing that's there, the reason it's black, is because the wavelength, the light is absorbed and it's not bounced back. So there is no light, we don't see it. So it's black in there because of the absence of light. This is an opening so that the covering is transparent, light passes through, but this is the opening that light gets inside your eyeball through, and that is your pupil. The accessory eye structures, the lacrimal glands, these produce your tears. You are constantly producing tears. Each of the lacrimal glands is about the size of an almond and is situated superior-lateral to the eyeball. So that means above and to the outside. So this is them right there. Leading from the lacrimal glands are 6 to 12 excretory lacrimal ducts that will drain tears onto the surface of your eye. And they will spread out and nourish and keep your eye moisturized. And when we blink, we spread those moistures over top of the eyeball. Tears, also known as lacrimal fluid, run from the lacrimal glands into the excretory lacrimal ducts onto the surface of the conjunctiva, which is that protective membrane there on the inside of your eyelid. And that will take them over the surface of the eyeball, and you will lose some of the tears, or lacrimal fluid will evaporate into the atmosphere. So here's what happens. These ducts produce the tears. They drain into the surface of the eyeball, and then as that fluid migrates its way across the eyeball, it drains into the lacrimal ducts. Some of you may remember from the skeletal system, there's a bone right there in the corner of the eye called the lacrimal bone. Okay, that's because the hole in the lacrimal bone drains into your nasal cavity. Okay, so this is why your nose runs when you cry. You produce many, many tears. The tears are trying to drain as fast as they can into the lacrimal duct to go into the nasal cavity. So you're producing extra tears. So that means you're draining extra tears. What tears can't be drained off by the lacrimal duct will run down your face, but these extra tears that are drained right out of the lacrimal duct will drain into your nasal cavity, causing your nose to run when you cry. All right. Let's talk about the anatomy of the eyeball. The wall of the eyeball consists of 3 layers or tunics. The fibrous tunic is the outer layer and is composed of the sclera, or the white of the eye. So that's right here. The sclera is the outer tunic. And the cornea, the transparent epithelium, protects the front of the eye. So it makes up the white of the eye and the cornea, this very outer covering. And it is transparent. You look through it. I mean, hopefully we all realize that. The vascular tunic, or uvea, is the middle layer, and is composed of the choroid, the ciliary body, and the iris. So your ciliary body, your iris is your colored part, and that's this coat, this inner layer right here. You can see it's just underneath the sclera. The nervous tunic is going to be the back layer, and that is the retina, and that's this layer right here. Now, your retina is only going to cover about the back 2/3 of your eye. Okay, everything in front of this is not going to have the retina or the third layer. Even though you can't easily see it, the cornea is a very important structure in the outer avascular fibrous tunic. Remember, avascular means no blood vessels. So not a lot of blood supply up there if it has no blood vessels. It's composed of a transparent epithelium, we look through it, that covers the anterior or the front of the eyeball and helps focus light onto the retina. The LASIK procedure is a common visual corrective procedure that is performed on the cornea of the eye. So your lens will allow you to focus and help focus light on your retina, but the cornea helps do that as well. So when they go in for LASIK, they change the thickness of the cornea to alter the light bending properties of your cornea to clear up your vision. Because of the amount of collagen fibers in the sclera, it forms the tough white part of the eyeball. The sclera gives the eye its shape and protects the inner anatomical parts. It is the protective covering of the eye. Of the 3 parts, the middle tunic, the choroid, forms the major vascular portion that lines the internal surface of the sclera. So here's where your blood supply is. So if avascular is no blood supply, vascular means that's where we have blood. The ciliary body consists of 2 parts. You have the ciliary process that secretes the aqueous humor. The aqueous humor is the fluid that fills the anterior chamber of the eye. So let's go back up to that picture. All right, the anterior chamber, that is this bump on the front of your eyeball right here. It sits right in front of the lens and the pupil. And if you've ever put your fingertip on your eyelid and moved your eyeball back and forth, you can feel it. Or if you've ever, it may sound a little creepy, but you ever watch somebody sleep when they're dreaming, you can see their eye moving back and forth as they enter REM, or rapid eye movement. And you can see that little bump on the front of their eye. The fluid that's behind and makes up that bump is called the aqueous humor. And this is where I put in my joke that I think the aqueous humor would make a great name for a band. The ciliary muscle that changes the shape of the lens to adapt to near and far vision is part of the ciliary body. So those muscles change the shape of the lens. So when you look through a pair of binoculars, you're looking through multiple lenses, and glass doesn't bend very well. So to get the light to focus so you can see clearly, you change the distance those multiple lenses are from each other. Well, we just have the one lens, so moving that lens in and out doesn't really help. So what we do is we change the shape of the lens to get the light to focus on our retina so that we can see things clearly. The iris is the colored portion of the eyeball consisting of circular and radial smooth muscle fibers. The inner nervous tunic, called the retina, lines the posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, or the back two-thirds of the eyeball, and that's what I was referring to on the previous few slides. The retina consists of the layer of melanin pigmented epithelium at the back of the eye that allows light to be absorbed rather than scattered. So light goes in the eye, it hits the retina and is absorbed. So your eye is kind of like a little black hole. Light can't get out of the black hole in space, that's why it's black. And it's not reflecting any light, so we can't see it, because everything we see is light that's reflecting off of something. So the light goes in the eye and is absorbed. It doesn't bounce back out, so we can't see it. It's being absorbed by the retina. So that's why when we look inside the eye in someone's pupil, it seems black, because the light has been absorbed. Without melanin, the scattered light in our eye would cause us to always be squinting, because that light would bounce around, and it would give us if you can think of it as feedback, it would, instead of that audio feedback, it would be stimulating the retina, overly stimulating the retina. The exact center of the retina is called the macula lutea. Also, you'll see that is going to be your main focal point. It's the center of a small depression in the central fovea called the fovea centralis. And that is when you look at something, when you look directly at an object out in front of you, the light bouncing off of that object is going to go in your eye and strike right there on the fovea, the center. And that depression is called the fovea centralis, and that point is known as the macula lutea. There are no rods or nerve cells in the fovea. We're going to talk about rods and cones a little later. Only a high concentration of cones, okay? As I said, we're going to talk about these two in a little bit. This gives us the sharp central vision necessary in any activity where detail is of primary importance, okay? Cones give us very good, sharp, clear visual acuity. And we have a very, very high concentration of cones in the middle of our retina. That's why we can see things very clearly, okay? This is where I usually go off a little bit and I talk about different animals and their vision. You know, for example, how can a deer walking through the woods look up and see me in the tree and I'm wearing camouflage, and it looks at me, but it can't find me, it can't see me, can't make me out? If a human were standing there, it would clearly be able to look up and see there's a human being. The human would be able to notice what bow I'm holding, probably would even be able to decipher the type of camouflage that I'm wearing. The deer, on the other hand, they can't make you out. They can't make out the outline, and that's why camouflage is effective. The reason is they have a much lower concentration of cones on their retina, and it doesn't give them the visual acuity. Even if a deer had the brain power to read, they wouldn't be able to, because they couldn't see the words on a page. They're basically, by our standards, they're almost legally blind when it comes to their visual acuity, okay? So the trade-off is they have way more rods. Rods give them low light visibility, and so they have traded their sharp vision for being able to see in the dark, and that's the difference.